She was bent over for 18 years. 18 years. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's before the towers fell, before the war took up a front in Afghanistan, before the iPhone ever existed, even before Google launched its IPO. 18 years, she's only been able to see the floor and barely the path in front of her. She could not look people in the face. She could not make eye contact for 18 years. When she wanders into the synagogue where Jesus is preaching, it's Jesus who calls her forward. She doesn't ask. He just does this for her. He lays on his hands, and the power of heaven coursed through his fingers, and he tells her that she is free from her ailment, and she rises straight up and stretches her hands even higher to offer her praise to God after 18 years. I imagine she'd been accustomed to being bent over after all that time. Seems that she probably arranged her bed to support her just right for the way that she was bent over. And she was probably accustomed to altering her clothes to be a little longer here and a little shorter there. I imagine she probably figured out how she was going to get into a chair in order to eat and how to eat. And I'm wondering how she drank. Because I'm remembering my mother, who had a really, really stiff neck. Now, that's not to say she was stubborn. It's to say that she had a really stiff neck. Like the bones were just kind of fused together, and gradually over the years her head was pushed down and down and down. And we started to notice that when she would drink, she'd only drink half a cup, because she couldn't tilt her head back any further to get the water in. How did she manage? I imagine everybody had a way of dealing with her. She'd be known to everybody in the community. I imagine her family had a way of dealing with her. I imagine that there were all of these accommodations to surround her and help her out. I think that she'd probably gotten along with just about everything that she had to deal with regard to being bent over for 18 years. Everything except one thing. I don't know how anyone can adapt to living with the stigma of being cursed, because this was understood to be a spirit that bent her over. And Jesus said that she had been afflicted even by Satan for these 18 years. I don't know how anyone gets used to that idea that they are cursed day after day. And that can't be normalized or accommodated. It's got to feel like a nail being driven deeper and deeper and deeper into her psyche every day, making her feel less valuable, less worthy, making her feel even less human. It wouldn't be hard to imagine her feeling an acute depression, wishing that she could just not live anymore, thinking that the truly horrible part of this curse is that she must wake every day and bear it again. Samuel, who is from Kenya, tells me that children in Kenya with special needs are typically ignored or hidden by their parents so that people won't know about them. It is a common myth in Kenya that children with special needs are either themselves cursed or are bearing a generational curse. And so families hide them. There are no specially trained teachers. There are no government programs to help such children in life. What we would diagnose and then accommodate and seek to understand is to many in Kenya not much more than a shameful thing and a drain on precious resources. He even told me the story of a young child with multiple developmental delays. Her parents kept her in a chicken coop for 15 years, and she could not talk. She could only cluck. The woman in our story comes into the synagogue while Jesus is teaching, and he calls her forward. He is the one who said, "I have come to proclaim liberty to the captives," right? And so he frees her from her ailment. And wouldn't you know, not even this good deed goes unpunished. Because the Pharisee gets all up after him, and as if she isn't even standing there anymore. She's raised up straight for the first time. She could look people in the face, and the face that she sees is that of an angry Pharisee chasing down Jesus, waving that judgy finger in his face. "How dare you do this on the Sabbath? You're not supposed to work, blah, blah, blah," and so on and so on. And Jesus takes him on. And you know where it goes from here, right? Jesus is just so good at challenging lifeless rules and the people who defend them. How I wish he could speak to that culture in Kenya that considers a child with ADHD or spina bifida cursed, instead of seeing and welcoming each one as a beloved child of God. And Samuel and Mary just asked me to review a ministry plan that they hope to enact when they get back to Kenya called Good Neighbors Kenya. They want to open up a school and welcome children who have special needs and teach their parents to love and value the children and teach their culture to find ways to include these children and clothe them and feed them and love all over them. And it's a beautiful dream. Maybe after our sermon, you will join me in praying for the formation of this and the way that this can take hold in Naivasha in Kenya. Jesus is so good at taking on those lifeless rules and the people uphold them, isn't he? Don't you kind of wish that he could get after those who place more value on economic gain than environmental responsibility? People who claim that they're just following the rules? Don't you wish that he could crawl into the conscience of immigration officials who are just enforcing the law while traumatizing children? Jesus responds to the judgy finger dude with a really good question. He says, "And ought not this woman, bound for 18 years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" Meanwhile, she's still standing there, listening to this back and forth, and getting this feeling that she hasn't had for almost 2 decades. The feeling of air filling her lungs. She's turning her neck. And she's twisting her back. And she's looking at all the people that are gathered in the synagogue, half of which are leaning forward to see how this thing between Jesus and the Pharisee is going to work out. And the other half just have their jaws on the floor because she's standing there with her shoulders square to her hips. And I hear so many resonant parallels in this story. People wander into worship services week after week, having made accommodations for their ailments without ever having anyone offer to pray for them and ask for God's healing. There are families that can't seem to lift their collective head up as one thing after another piles on top of them and squashes their dreams. There are entire congregations that feel hopeless, and even worse, have normalized the hopelessness. Ought not this person, this family, this congregation be set free on the Sabbath day? What do you think? Kind of seems what the Sabbath day is for. Kind of seems what people would be walking into church to find. Seems to me it's what you want. The one who came that we may have life and life abundant. The one who embodies the fullness of God, who sets the captive free, gives sight to the blind, and makes the lame to walk. This very same Jesus is calling. You're not asking. He's calling. He sees the struggle. He sees the weight that bears down upon us, the downcast eyes and the hard days. He knows the legion of things that tie us to our ailments, how it's become normal to bear it and no longer hope to be free from it. He knows. And he calls to you, to your family, to Havenwood, to Nativity, to every other worshiping community working so hard to accomplish its mission, to overcome the obstacles that keep it stuck, so it can show the love of God to the world. Don't listen to those who represent the Pharisee in the story, who speak to sustain what keeps things stuck. Listen instead to the voice of Jesus, who is calling you to find release, to find relief, to find life, and life abundant. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And how many of you got into what you do for the sake of helping people out in the world? Greg, did you become a musician simply for your own joy, or because you wanted to minister through music to others? There's a bit of both in there, because it's part of your passion and it's something that you want to give. Beth Ann, you grew up with parents who lead music in churches. And so there's something that you already know about how music can help draw people out from where they've been stuck. You're looking to get into medicine. And so you want to be part of this team that helps people see the ailment that they've just been living with and set them free from it. Right? Yeah. And Steve, you take a look at problems in transportation, or at least you used to. Still do. You're taking a look at these problems and how people get around, and you're trying to help them not be so darn frustrated and get to where they're going and live a life that isn't spent just traveling all over the place, right? And you've gotten into the nonprofit world because you see that nonprofits are out there for the purpose of helping people, not for the purpose of just making people billions of dollars, right? And Tony, you're in a place where you're trying to help people strengthen themselves so that they could live the dreams that they have, right? And you married a guy, some pastor dude, didn't you?
No, he wasn't a pastor when I married him.
Oh, he wasn't a pastor when you married him?
No.
But you stuck with him anyway.
I did.
You certainly did.
Yeah.
And you have given so much of your life through this church for the sake of drawing people to Jesus and helping them grow and strengthen in their faith.
Most important thing in the world.
The most important thing in the world. This guy here, I'm not going to tell everybody's story here today, but I'm having fun. This guy here is not only this faithful, smiling, gentle, happy guy, but he is also one who helped to start how many different marinas and sailing events in the Bay? Too many to mention. who may have spent more time on the deck of a sailboat than he did on the dock when the weekends came around, and given people that necessary space for Sabbath on water. Right? Donna, who has given so much of herself to help scouts find success in their scouting, to sing with the choir, to look after the way our church runs. I could go on and on and on. But the question is, not just how have you lived your life to help others, but if Jesus were to call your name, what would he be freeing you from today? What would he be lifting from you, from your family, from the church? What would he be seeking to relieve you from that keeps you bent over and seeing the ground rather than the path in front of you and offering praise to God? That's what we're praying about today.